Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to my video. So today I'm finally doing a review of Beauty Bakerie. This was the first brand that I tried, I think in June. So it's been a minute. And the thing that I'm doing where I want to try a new black-owned brand every month for a year. And I have a lot of thoughts and feelings. I've tried all of these products out a lot, and I'm going to just jump right in, give you my thoughts, and hopefully a way that doesn't take too much time. Okay, so first I'm going to start with the thing that I have the most thoughts and feelings about. So this was the very first product that I tried in the video that I did, which I guess I will link below. We'll see, I honestly always forget to do that, but we'll promise it nonetheless. So in terms of packaging, it's just like plain cardboard. It's very sleek. I don't know, I like it. Beauty Bakerie's products obviously are very themed out. Like they're very cutesy, food themed products. That's like kind of like the shtick of their brand, right? And that's personal preference, whether or not that's something that you're into. Generally, that's not something that I'm super attracted to in a brand. Like, that isn't the thing that like is gonna get me to buy your products, but I think they do it in a way that's not super obnoxious and that's just the right amount of that, you know? So I think they actually do it very well. In terms of the color story, this is a neutral palette, right? Like it's in warm neutral palette. You can't really get past that. So if you're not super into neutrals, if you are a color lover, you're probably not going to like this right at the gate. However, I do feel like there's a good range of neutral colors in here. Like you have more bronzy, just like lighter bronzy tones. Then you have like this one really bright yellowy gold. You have these more like reddish metallics down here. And then you have some like blues and green duochromes. So I think you actually can create a pretty wide range of neutral looks with this palette, which I actually think is really great. So there are 12 shades in this palette and there's 4 mattes and 8 metallics. Now, I have some things that I really like about this palette and some things that I don't love. So we're gonna start out with the positives. So the metallics I think have a really, really beautiful formula. They're very creamy, very smooth, easy to apply. There's not much fallout. They're bright and reflective. Just like overall really, really beautiful, solid metallics. But they're not so textured and thick that they're going to emphasize texture on your eyelids. I have really textured eyelids, like really dry, crinkly eyelids, and I don't find that they emphasize texture at all. I think they're really beautiful. And even in the pan, I think I talked about this before, but they look just like, you know, run-of-the-mill, like standard metallic shades, but when you swatch them and when you put them on your eyes, they're really beautiful and they have a lot more of shift and dimension to them than it looks like they have just in the actual pan. And they also don't crease at all throughout the day, even though they are so creamy, which is really a plus. So now the mattes. Okay, so there are only 4 matte shades in here, and I think they have picked a good selection of matte shades. Like I think it makes sense with the palette, and I think like the matte shades that they chose are smart, even though they're only 4. Now, here's the thing. They're very lightly pigmented. Like, lightly pigmented. And well, normally I don't criticize a shadow for that in and of itself. The problem with these mattes is that I don't find that they build. And that's really the thing that is my issue with them. I can spend like so long, like 20 minutes, just building up these shadows, and I just don't find that they build. I don't find that they build up in depth no matter how many times you layer them. They blend well, they don't like get patchy, they don't have fallout, they don't fade. Like other than that, they perform fine. they just don't have as much pigment as you think that they're going to when you look at them in the pan. And then they also don't build, which is really my issue with this palette. So I don't use this palette alone. I find that I have to grab another palette to use with it to get more depth. Obviously, not every look has to be like super deep. It's just the way that I prefer to do my makeup. And the issue that I see with these mattes is that I'm on the very tail end of the like pale spectrum of skin tones. So if you have even a medium skin tone, I think you might run into issues with this palette not being deep enough for you. Obviously, I have a difficult time speaking to that, but if I can't use this palette on its own and I have a difficult time building up the depth of these shades, I imagine someone with a medium to deep to rich skin tone is going to run into problems. And if these shadows showed up the way that they look in the pan, I think this would be a beautiful neutral palette, and I don't think that there would be any issues with the shades that they chose. It's just that they don't build up. And that being said, I do think that I would see myself reaching for this if I needed a neutral palette because it is really beautiful. And this has 2.8 grams of product in each shadow, which is a lot of shadow. So you actually do get a pretty generous amount of shadow in this palette. So if you wanted to use this as your everyday palette, I think you would, it would last you a while. I'm never going to go through an eyeshadow palette. I'm likely never even going to hit pan on an eyeshadow palette. But if this was like your everyday palette, I think it would give you a really good run. Here's the thing. This is $38 US. So I think that's pretty reasonably priced. Like, it's not super expensive to me. It's an indie brand. I think that's fair. That does mean it's 50 Canadian dollars. So if you live in Canada, and I will say, I think I used a code and I got like 40% off of this order, which is why I have so many products, because otherwise I would not have been able to afford to buy these. So there are codes out there that you can use to get discounts, and that's kind of the reason that I ended up making this order in the first place. But yeah, so if you're Canadian, unless you like more lighter, softer looks and you really want to try this brand, I don't think you'd be disappointed, but just overall, this isn't what I would recommend getting from the brand because of the issue that I had with the matte. Okay, so next, moving on to a product that I think is absolutely gorgeous. This is the Milk and Honey highlighting palette. I've heard so many people talk about this before I placed this order. I know a ton of people really, really love this, and I think it's for really good reason. These are beautiful highlighters. The packaging, again, is the same. It's pretty consistent in terms of like their cutesy food theme. This is like maybe a little bit less obnoxious than having like graham crackers on your palette, but again, it's up to personal preference. I don't find it to be overly obnoxious. In terms of the shades in here, I think there's a really good range of shades. You obviously have this deep bronze, this like peachy, beautiful shade, and then these two shades are light enough that I personally am able to use them. I use this shade, Queen Being, this bronze one, as like a bronzer topper, and then this one, Be Sweet. I love, this is the most beautiful inner corner shade. I'm wearing it today. And then this shade, Oh Honey, this pinky one at the top, and then this Spoiler Alert shade I'm able to use on its own. I'm wearing this Spoiler Alert shade on my cheeks today. So I think there are a pretty good range of shades in here. And in terms of the formula, I think these are just such beautiful, solid highlighters. Since adding this to my collection, I've found myself reaching for it all the time. Like, this shade is the most perfect neutral champagne shade. Like, it's not overly gold. I don't find it super silvery, although like I said, I am very pale, so maybe other people would disagree with me, but it's just such a solid highlighter formula. I've thoroughly enjoyed using it so much. They're really creamy, almost thick, but super reflective, but they're also buildable. So you can build them up to be like really intense like I have today, but you don't have to do that. You can sheer them out, and wear them a little bit more natural. They're pretty bright, so if you don't like somewhat of an intense highlighter, this isn't necessarily like a glow from within palette, but I think it's really versatile and just, for me, just so good. I really love this. Also, I think I mentioned this in my last video as well, very reminiscent of the ABH Glow Kit formula to me personally. Like, that was kind of the first thing I thought of in terms of like how creamy they are, a little bit on the thicker side. You can wear them a little bit lighter or build them up to be like really intense. Even when you build them up, they do just look glowy. Like, obviously they're very reflective, but they never really look like a stripe on your face. They just make your skin glow super beautifully. And they also don't super emphasize texture in the skin. Obviously they're brighter highlights. They're going to emphasize a little bit of texture, but it's not something that I really notice a ton of. Each highlighter in here is 5 grams. That's a little bit less than like a normal highlighter, like a single highlighter would be. But I think like how many people actually go through highlighters, I mean, I don't personally, and I think they're still a pretty good size. And this is also $38. I believe all of the palettes that I have are $38, and so again, that's $50 Canadian. If you're in the States, I would say go pick this up. Like, literally, it's so good. I think everyone will love this. Like, I think this is the standout product of all the products that I've tried. I cannot like go on enough about how much I love this highlighter palette. If you're Canadian, I would say this would be my one personal recommendation. If you can only pick up one item from the brand and you really want to try them, you want to support them, this would be the one that I would choose. And like I said before, there are discount codes. I got like a pretty significant discount off of this. So that's also something to keep in mind if you wanted to try the brand out as well. Next, we have the palette that I have such a hard time pronouncing. It's the Sculpting. There we go. I did it. This is the Face and Body palette. Essentially, it's a blush palette with a highlighter in it. Again, cutesy packaging. You can see there's like ice cream cones on the top of it. I don't know. I think it's pretty cute. And again, not in a way that's like so in your face obnoxious that I just like can't look at it, you know? I don't think this is bad at all. So in terms of the color section that they have in here, I love blush, so I'm not complaining that there's brighter blush shades in here. And because you have such vibrant blushes, obviously this is going to work across a wider variety of skin tones other than just mine. And you have blushes, in my opinion, from like every color family. So you have like your orange, you have like your pinky red, and then a more neutral blush depending on your skin tone. Although I wonder if this creme brulee blush up here, which is what I'm wearing today, might be a little bit light if you have a medium to deep skin tone. And this highlighter down here, Beignet, is like a light gold. This works for me. I think if it was any deeper, I wouldn't be able to use it on my cheeks. Because I do wear so much blush and just like cheek products, I find that I can get away with wearing highlighters that are just a touch too dark for me, especially on my cheeks. In terms of the formula of these blushes, the one thing that I will say is that they are quite powdery. When you tap your brush in the pan, there is like a lot of kickback. Just something to be mindful of. I don't think it necessarily takes away from the quality of these products. It's just like very powdery. Like, I have to like really like go away from my makeup desk and like blow it into the rest of the room, because they like generate quite a lot of like kickback in the pan. They're really blendable, even though they are super bright on my skin tone too. Like, I don't have issues blending them. I don't find they're patchy or anything. Like, they really blend super beautifully, and they're also really buildable. So you can do a lighter like sheer or wash, or you can really build it up quite heavily. This shade French Tart is totally matte, so there's no glitter shimmer at all. And then the shade Creme Brulee and the shade Pink Truffle have a little bit of a sheen to them. They're not like, I wouldn't say they're a glowy blush or like a shimmery blush by any means, but they have a little bit of a sheen, a little bit of a glow, so they're not totally fully matte. They're almost like a satin, I would say. Really, really beautiful. Again, this Creme Brulee blush has been like my go-to like neutral, lighter blush. I really, really love it. And this Beignet highlighter is not the same formula as the highlighter formula in this palette. It's lighter in formula, definitely not quite as thick or heavy, and it's not quite as intense or reflective. This is very much like a glow from within type of highlighter. It's really smooth, just so beautiful. And just like a really solid blush palette, I've been reaching for this a ton. And each blush or pan in here has 3.5 grams of product, and that's a little bit more than half of a standard blush. So again, how often do I go through a blush? Never. I don't think having like a smaller blush pan in here compared to like a full-size blush is a bad thing at all. And again, this blush palette is $38, so 50 Canadian dollars. Is it worth $50? If you love blush, I think yes, because it's just a really solid blush palette. And you would not be disappointed, and I don't think you'd regret spending $50 on it necessarily. And the last product that I have to talk about is the Flower Setting Powder. This is another like kind of cult classic beauty bakery product that a ton of people have, a ton of people talk about and love. I have the shade Rice. It's essentially just a loose, white loose powder. The packaging I think is really cute. If you watched my like first impressions video, it comes in like this little flower like bag. I think it's so adorable. Again, not done in a way that's obnoxious, but like done really well. And the packaging of this actual powder is like plastic, very like sturdy. It doesn't leak, which is a really good thing. I find a lot of my loose products like will leak around the sides, powder will come out. This doesn't do that at all. If I was ever going anywhere, I would definitely bring this for that reason. It also has a sifter inside that you can like turn. I keep forgetting to turn it, so there's like product all up in here, so I'm not gonna show you, but that's a good quality to have in a powder if you remember to close it. And in terms of like the color, obviously this is a white powder. It works for me if you're very fair. I think it's a really nice white powder. And the way I generally use my loose powders is I bake with them, but I don't think that it leaves a super intense color behind when you brush it off. So I think across the board, if all of the shades of this powder are like that, I think that's a really good quality to have. You're not gonna like, if you bake, you're not gonna have like a triangle or like patch of your face that's going to be like really stuck down with that pigment from the powder. In terms of the overall formula, I really, really like this as well. It's a little bit thinner. My kind of like reference point for loose powders is my Maybelline Fit Me, because that's the one I've used over and over again. I've gone through a ton of those. It's kind of like my staple loose powder. That's a little bit thicker in texture. This is much thinner. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It is a type of formula that I feel like if you have dry patches, it might stick down to like any dry areas that you have. I don't personally suffer from having like dry skin. I have really oily skin, so I can't really necessarily speak to that, but that's kind of just the instinct that I have. In terms of the finish that it gives, it looks really smooth on the face, so it almost has a blurring effect, and when you like feel your skin when you wear it, it's really, really smooth. It's so beautiful, and it wears amazingly well throughout the day. It wears very gracefully, so it doesn't break apart, it doesn't get like super cakey or powdery, and it controls oil really well. It honestly is beating my Maybelline powder in terms of formula and how it wears. I think this is such a beautiful loose powder. If you have oily skin, I would really recommend checking this out. I think it's really, really nice. It's 12.5 grams, so it is a little bit smaller than my Maybelline powder, but that I think has a pretty generous amount of product in it. I don't have a ton of loose powders on retainer, so I don't know necessarily how it compares to like a ton of other loose powders. The price of this is $24 US, so that's about 32 Canadian dollars. I think that's pretty good. I think it's a pretty standard price point for a non-drugstore powder. I don't think that's necessarily bad. I don't think that's overpriced or anything necessarily. And I think if you're looking for a loose powder, like if you're on the market for a new loose powder, I would really recommend checking this out. So overall, my like overall thoughts on what I've tried, I am so happy. Like I said, like these 3 products have become super heavy in just my normal day-to-day rotation. When I'm doing my makeup for like normal life, just kind of like every day, I find myself just, without even consciously doing it, just automatically reaching for these products. They're now just in my like heavy rotation of products that I love, and that happened like super quickly. I just think they're really good quality for me and how I do my makeup. They fit perfectly well into like my routine and my collection. In terms of like whether or not they're worth it for their price point or whatever, if you are American, I would say hell yeah, go and check this brand out. They're really good. And I think in terms of like USD, they're priced pretty fairly. Like I don't think they're super expensive. They're not like drugstore prices, but they're not exorbitantly priced by any means. If you're Canadian, obviously with shipping and duties and taxes and all that stuff, and then the conversion, they're a little bit pricier. But if you were really interested in picking out or picking up any of these products, I don't think you would be disappointed by them, and I think they're really, really beautiful. I think their products are really beautiful. Maybe I wouldn't get another one of their eyeshadow palettes, but the rest of their products that I've tried, I'm super happy with. And I think they did kind of like pioneer the whole like food themed makeup trend that so many other brands are doing in a different way or just copying. So I've had a ton of fun playing with these, and I look forward to playing with them more. Let me know if you guys have tried Beauty Bakerie, what you think of them, if there are any other products that you think I should try out, even though I really gotta stop buying things. Anyway, but yeah, let me know if there's any other videos that you'd love or like to see from me, and I will see you next time. Bye.
I want royalties.